You've found just stories, simple, heartfelt moments from real lives, stories that remind us how connected we all are through love, loss, and hope. Get cozy. The stories are about to begin. Arthur walked through the park, and his gaze fell upon a cozy bench nestled alone by the fountain. Deciding to take a break, he sat down, immersing himself in the silence and tranquility of the place. An amazing beauty reigned around, as if descended from the pages of an old book. Tall poplars, lined up along the wide alley, intertwined their crowns high in the sky, creating a living dome through which golden sunbeams pierced. People hurried past. Some rushed about their business, others enjoyed a leisurely stroll. Young mothers, alone and in small groups, pushed strollers, their faces radiant with smiles. Small children on scooters and bikes zipped back and forth, filling the air with ringing laughter. It was an idyllic picture of urban life. This peaceful landscape awakened memories of his own past in Arthur. He recalled a beautiful park in the center of a small town that had been the backdrop of his childhood. Until the 5th grade, his upbringing was mainly handled by his grandmother, Eleanor, and they often walked there together. They fed the birds, had long conversations about everything in the world, and Eleanor always spoiled him with a delicious bun from the local bakery or ice cream. Sometimes they would meet familiar kids from the yard in the park, also walking with their parents. Eleanor and his grandfather Henry, if he was with them, would start fun games around the fountain or among the mighty trees. It was a bright, serene time, filled with warmth and care. Remembering Eleanor, Arthur smiled habitually, but the smile was tinged with light sadness. Now he could think of her without the burning pain that had tormented him immediately after her passing. It happened when he was already a third-year student, but even then he wept, not ashamed of his tears. Grandmother Eleanor was, perhaps, the closest and dearest person in his life, the one who understood him without words. He often remembered her, especially at turning points in his destiny. He wondered how she would have reacted to this or that event, regretted that she could not see his successes and share the joy of his victories. And there were many victories. Arthur graduated from university with honors, became a qualified engineer, just as Eleanor had once dreamed. It was she who first noticed that little Arthur wasn't just assembling construction sets. He built surprisingly symmetrical and well-thought-out structures, intuitively sensing the correct proportions. Eleanor recognized his abilities in mathematics even before school, predicting a brilliant mind and a great future as a talented engineer. His mother, Sarah, only smiled, convinced it was just blind grandmotherly love. But Sarah was wrong. Eleanor turned out to be right about everything except one thing: the great future. Arthur truly showed himself to be a talented mathematician from the 1st grade. While other children struggled with the basics, he easily solved problems for older grades. The teacher gave him extra assignments, and Eleanor worked with him at home. She herself was a decent mathematician, having worked in an architectural bureau until retirement, and was proud that Arthur took after her. "Oh, it's a pity Henry doesn't see what you've become," she would sigh, looking at his certificates from city competitions. Henry died when Arthur was still an infant, but Eleanor often talked about him, creating in his mind the image of an enthusiastic, attentive surgeon who was loved and respected in the town. Henry passed away right at his workplace, sudden dizziness, darkening in his eyes, chest pain. He was rushed to cardiology with a heart attack, but alas, they couldn't save him. Arthur had never seen his grandfather, but he loved him thanks to the stories of Eleanor and Sarah, as well as numerous photographs. Henry was an unseen presence in his life. But the boy didn't know his father at all. As he grew older, Arthur began to ask questions, feeling a sharp lack of a male presence. Eleanor and Sarah were kind and caring, but he needed someone to talk to about manly topics, kick a ball around, discuss problems. Sarah long avoided the answer. Eleanor sent him to his mother. Finally, Sarah couldn't bear it any longer. "He left me when he found out I was pregnant, just ran away." A common story. She said they met at a disco. He was from out of town, lied a lot, and then disappeared. After he left, she realized she was expecting a child and decided to keep it no matter what, despite doubts about the father. Her parents supported her. Later, Arthur's father reappeared in their town for work. He tried to find the girl with whom he had a wonderful time, but met her already with a rounded belly, and disappeared again. Sarah only knew his name and town, and even that wasn't certain to be true. He could easily lie. "He never looked for you," Sarah sighed. "Why? He knew where I lived. If he had wanted to, he would have found me. He ran away. He was scared. I don't even blame him. It's just an ugly story. I'm sorry it happened this way." Arthur was old enough to understand how hard it was for his mother to remember this. She felt foolish and abandoned, which is why she didn't want to tell him. But it was important for Arthur to know the truth. His mother's confession shattered his illusions, and he stopped dreaming of meeting his father, stopped imagining him as a hero forced to hide his identity due to important work. Dreams of a pilot, a sailor, or a soldier dissipated, leaving only a bitter understanding of reality. Until the age of 10, Arthur lived with Eleanor and then moved in with his mother. She rented an apartment near the Mathematical Lyceum to make it easier for him to get to school. He was old enough and didn't need Eleanor's constant care. Nevertheless, Arthur went to her every weekend. He missed her, his childhood room, his cat Bulik, the whole atmosphere of the house where his early childhood was spent. In the new Lyceum, he was struck by his first, strong but unrequited love. His chosen one was Victoria, a girl from a parallel class. They were in different classes, but physical education lessons were held together. Arthur didn't shine with athletic talents. He was an excellent student and medalist in all subjects except physical education, where he had a strained C. He couldn't stand these lessons until his class was combined with the 6th B. Victoria was impossible not to notice. Tall, slender, she moved with the lightness and grace of a panther. Arthur watched her spellbound, following how her long, shiny hair, the color of melted chocolate, shimmered. At school, she often wore her hair down, but for physical education, she always gathered it into a high ponytail. Arthur liked this hairstyle because it opened up her face, allowing him to admire her perfect features: a straight nose, dark, arched eyebrows, full, beautifully curved lips, huge eyes of an unreal turquoise shade. They shone on her tanned skin like two lakes. Victoria was a beauty and knew it perfectly well. Others noticed her beauty too. Victoria was always surrounded by crowds of admirers, but she, friendly and amiable with everyone, didn't let anyone get too close, which pleased Arthur. He himself was not among her obvious admirers. He lacked courage. Popular boys circled around Victoria, handsome, athletic, confident, and witty. Arthur had never been like that. Grandmother Eleanor was right. Arthur's talent fully blossomed in the specialized lyceum. Teachers praised him, gave him extra lessons, and assigned complex tasks. In class, he quickly became the one you could always copy homework from. He never refused anyone, considering it a trifle. For this, he was respected. Word of his mathematical abilities spread beyond the class, and one day, right during the break, she approached him. Victoria. Instead of sports uniform, she wore a black dress with a white collar, emphasizing her slenderness. Arthur was completely flustered by her closeness for a moment. "Hi," Victoria smiled radiantly. "My name is Victoria. Our classes have physical education at the same time. Do you remember me?" She asks if he remembers her. If only she knew how much time thoughts of her occupied. Arthur nodded weakly, unable to utter a word due to the raging emotions. Victoria came up to him herself. She was talking to him. The situation seemed unreal but incredibly pleasant. "You see," she continued, hesitating slightly, "the math teacher gave us a difficult test for homework. I didn't understand anything, and this is a crucial grade. If I get a C, that's it, a C for the quarter. Mom will kill me. Can you help me out?" Arthur was ready to do anything for Victoria, not just solve a test. He was ready to move mountains. Of course, he agreed. Joy flashed in the girl's turquoise eyes. "Thank you." In a rush of gratitude, Victoria hugged Arthur. "You really are great. It's no wonder the girls from your class say so. After this incident, they didn't become friends, but Arthur was no longer invisible to her. She noticed him in the corridors and greeted him warmly. Sometimes their eyes met during physical education. Less often, she would initiate a conversation about something insignificant, but it didn't matter. The main thing was that she noticed him. In ninth grade, Victoria started dating Mark, the captain of the local football team. That year, many couples formed at school. Probably it was that age. Seeing them together, Arthur felt an unpleasant feeling, akin to jealousy. He was still in love with Victoria, and this childish feeling grew stronger, evolving into something new and very powerful. Other girls didn't interest Arthur, although some classmates clearly liked the smart and pleasant guy. If he had shown even the slightest initiative, they would have gladly gone on a date with him. But he wasn't interested. All his thoughts were occupied by the unattainable Victoria. How Arthur rejoiced when rumors spread through the Lyceum that Mark had left Victoria for an older girl, a student at a local university. They said she was older, independent, and well off. Victoria, as if in revenge, almost immediately started dating a guy older than her too. He picked her up after school in his own car. He was handsome, stylish, looked like a character from a youth series, seemed to be a student too. Victoria, with eyes shining with happiness, fluttered into the salon of the beautiful car waiting for her at the entrance, and the couple drove away. Girls, as far as Arthur could tell, envied Victoria. They said her boyfriend was the son of very wealthy parents. How lucky Victoria is! He's crazy about her. As soon as she turns 18, they'll get married, classmates gossiped. Our Victoria got a ticket to a happy life. She won't need to study later. Why? She'll have as much money as she wants. At that time, girls universally dreamed of meeting a prince, a man who would shower them with expensive gifts and fulfill all their desires, like in the movies. They were young and didn't think that the only free cheese is in a mousetrap. Against the backdrop of Victoria's new admirer, Arthur felt like a complete nobody. How could he compare to such a prince? That one had a car and rich parents, and Arthur, just an ordinary guy. And then there was graduation, entering university. Life began to spin and whirl. Victoria surfaced in his thoughts peripherally at the first Lyceum alumni reunion, 2 years after graduation. Arthur learned that the classmates' predictions had come true. Victoria had indeed married her suitor right after turning 18. She didn't go to study. Apparently, her new father-in-law had arranged for her to be a secretary in his company. Victoria earned fabulous money, drove her own car, lived with her husband in a luxurious apartment in the center, and often flew abroad for holidays. In short, she embodied the collective dream of local girls. How lucky, former classmates repeated, listening to Victoria's story. She herself didn't come to the reunion. She was on holiday with her husband in the Maldives. One of her friends even showed photos of the happy couple from the beach. The pictures looked like shots from a Hollywood movie. Arthur returned home after the reunion in a sad mood. He had gone there only for Victoria, wanted to see her turquoise eyes, maybe exchange a few words. Over the years he had grown up, become more confident. Perhaps he would have even dared to talk about his feelings. It seemed to him that the relationship with the adult rich kid was in the past. He hoped Victoria was free and open to communication. But no. Now she was a married lady with a completely different life. Perhaps this was the life she dreamed of, the one they envied. Of course, Arthur couldn't give her all that. How could he? And then life started spinning again. Studying, exams, competitions, projects. Arthur, as a promising specialist, was hired part-time by a large oil company, Spectrum, while still a student. It was difficult to get in there. Salaries were 3 or 4 times higher than the regional average. At first, Arthur even felt dizzy from the amounts of money transferred. True, he also had to work hard. Combining studying and work was not easy. But Arthur managed, and he managed well. Eleanor and Sarah predicted a great future for him. They were proud of him. Then only Sarah was proud, because Eleanor suddenly passed away. Arthur fell into apathy, from which his beloved and interesting work helped him emerge, and also the thought of how painful it would be for Eleanor to see him in such a state. She wanted her grandson to live life to the fullest, rejoice in every day, socialize, and develop. Arthur thought he had forgotten Victoria. No, memories of first love remain forever, but the torment and worries about the impossibility of their union were gone. He even started dating a girl, Nina, and their relationship quickly became serious. Nina studied at the same university, a year younger. They met at a student conference. She was sweet, kind, open, smart, interested in modern architecture. Arthur knew that Nina was truly in love with him. It was visible in her eyes, felt in her touch. It was surprisingly pleasant to know that someone loved you so sincerely. True, Arthur himself didn't feel head over heels for Nina. Nothing like what he had experienced with Victoria, but he understood Nina perfectly. Her attention touched him, and her admiration for him was captivating. He wanted to take care of Nina. He liked to make her happy, to bring a smile to her sweet face. Their opinions coincided on the most important issues. They often understood each other without words, finished each other's sentences. Complete idyll. This seemed more than enough to Arthur. And the feeling for Victoria at school, well, those were teenage passions. Adults perceive the world differently, and that's normal. The main thing was that he felt good and calm with Nina. The young people were not in a hurry to get married. It was a mutual decision. They were happy together as they were. First, both wanted to establish their careers, to get on their feet. No one doubted that they would get married sooner or later. It was a decided matter. Arthur was the first to graduate and of course got a full-time position at Spectrum. His salary increased several times, as did the volume and complexity of his tasks. Soon, Nina also received her diploma. A promising graduate was gladly hired by an architectural bureau on the recommendation of the rector. Nina's eyes glowed with enthusiasm when she talked about her new job, and Arthur understood her, feeling the same way. Nina even moved in with Arthur. By that time, he had managed to buy his own apartment and renovate it. They lived like a most ordinary family, and of course planned a wedding. They had been together for so long, and everything planned was happening quickly. Why delay? Both decided to postpone having children, but to formalize the relationship. Nina dreamed of a summer wedding, a light white dress, a photo shoot by the river, a celebration. Arthur supported her. He liked every one of her suggestions. Or maybe he just didn't care. The wedding details interested him little. His thoughts were occupied by another large project. It happened in February. Nina had gone to visit her parents in a neighboring town, having accumulated several days off. That day, Arthur and his colleagues secured a large sum for an important project. Someone suggested celebrating the event. Arthur gladly agreed. The negotiations had been tense, and he wanted to relax. They decided to go to a bar in the city center. Alex, a colleague and comrade, assured them it had the best live music, delicious beer, and beautiful girls. A bar it was, no one objected. The tables and seats at the bar were occupied, but the administrator, recognizing Alex as a regular, found a small sofa in the corner. The company settled in comfortably. Conversations, jokes, laughter. They made plans for the money they had secured, dreamed of how their idea would bring the company big profits. And then Arthur couldn't believe his eyes. He saw her, Victoria. His head swam, his pulse quickened, a chill ran down his spine. Everything was like in his youth. She still had a huge influence on him, a grown and successful man. His feelings, it turned out, hadn't gone anywhere, hadn't changed. But Victoria, yes, Victoria had changed a lot, but she still attracted Arthur as if by a magnet. Incredible. When Arthur noticed Victoria, she was standing at the bar talking to a waitress. The girls were smiling at each other. It was clear they had a good relationship. Victoria. It was her smile. Her long hair the color of milk chocolate cascaded over her shoulders. Her turquoise eyes on her tanned face still shone. but now there was something elusive in them, either a hidden sadness or anxiety. Arthur hadn't noticed this at school. Victoria was wearing an emerald knee-length dress and chunky winter sneakers, a semi-sporty yet elegant look. "Al, here." Alex looked at him questioningly. He was telling him something and waiting for Arthur's opinion. But Arthur... He was looking at Victoria, noticing no one else around. "Okay. Saw someone you know?" "She's a looker," Alex assessed, following Arthur's gaze, and immediately returned to his speech, losing interest in the girl. Victoria moved further away with the waitress, into a corner of the hall invisible from Arthur's spot. He didn't want to lose sight of her, got up, and hurried after them. Arthur managed to see Victoria slip into a back room. He decided to wait. Maybe she went to chat with her waitress friend. Sooner or later she would come out, and then their meeting was inevitable. But what to say to Victoria? How to start a conversation? Arthur didn't know. He was nervous, running through casual, non-committal phrases in his head. Victoria fluttered out of the back room, but Arthur wasn't expecting to see this. She was wearing the bar's waitress uniform, a black t-shirt, tight jeans, a gray apron, and a name tag with Victoria. Victoria? A waitress? How was this possible? She married a rich man and should be living a socialite's life, not running around with trays. The girl was about to walk past, but Arthur called out to her, "Victoria, is that you?" She stopped, looked him up and down carefully, and was slightly flustered. Recognition flickered in her eyes. Arthur saw it clearly, and suddenly Victoria was embarrassed. She smiled awkwardly and replied, "Well, yes, it's me. And you?" "Arthur?" "Yes, yes. Wow, how you've changed. How interesting you've become." She smiled charmingly, no longer shy. "At school, you were sort of a typical nerd, tall, thin, unremarkable. Years often benefit you men." Arthur blossomed at the compliment. Victoria had just clearly expressed sympathy. This was incredible. Immediately he felt more confident and energetic. "And are you working here?" Arthur asked. "As you can see," Victoria sighed, the smile fading from her face. "Life is a strange thing, unpredictable. Who would have thought it would turn out this way?" "Did something happen?" "Something happened. An ugly story. But everything happens for the best. I always say that." "I work at Spectrum." "Oh, right, I heard from someone. Well done. You were always smart and driven." Victoria stood very close, saying pleasant words and looking the way she looked at him. There was much in that gaze: interest, admiration, warmth, tenderness. "And we're here celebrating a company event with colleagues," Arthur explained for some reason, waving his hand towards the table. "Well, great. Are you planning to stay here much longer?" Arthur shrugged. "It'll get less crowded towards the end of my shift. We can talk, okay?" It's so nice to meet someone from childhood. That was the best time. All evening, Victoria was busy, scurrying around with trays, smiling at tipsy men, joking back at their sometimes vulgar, sometimes silly jokes. They often met each other's eyes, Victoria and Arthur. His heart was flooded with tenderness. Such a silent dialogue with the girl who, it turned out, still meant a lot to him. Once, she hadn't noticed him at all, and now she herself suggested chatting after her shift. Arthur's colleagues were getting ready to go home. He went out to see them off to a taxi. "Why aren't you going?" Alex, whose tongue was already slurring, asked in surprise. "No, I'll stay here a little longer." "Understood," Alex smiled conspiratorially. "Yeah, the acquaintance is a looker with a tray. Just don't forget you have Nina." Arthur thought about his words. Nina, kind, smart, loyal, reliable. Surely she would be upset to learn that the man she was marrying in the summer stayed at the bar not just for fun, but to chat with his first love. On the other hand, he wasn't doing anything wrong. He was just curious to know how Victoria ended up as a waitress. Closer to closing time, there were few people left in the bar. Victoria could finally sit down at the table with Arthur. She looked a little tired, and perhaps even more attractive because of it. "Oh, it was a tough shift," she smiled at Arthur. "Can I get you something?" "No, thank you. Then I'd have to bring it myself. And I'd rather sit. My legs are killing me. Waitresses in bars rarely wear heels." "It suits you," Arthur said. "Thanks, but a waitress uniform isn't what I'd want to wear, of course." "Then why?" "Well, fate happened that way. You know I married Max right after school, the one I dated in high school?" Arthur nodded. "Well, at first everything was like a fairy tale. I couldn't believe life could be like that. A huge apartment, a room straight out of a design magazine, a loving, handsome, caring husband with an expensive foreign car, constant gifts, a card with substantial amounts without asking, travel, work. Max's father hired me as a secretary for the senior manager. My job was to record calls in his absence, maybe make coffee a couple of times. That's it. I sat in a beautiful office, read novels, played on my phone, painted my nails, chatted with colleagues, changed outfits, got ready for work. It was beautiful. And I earned a more than decent salary. People work around the clock for that kind of money. What about studying? Didn't you go anywhere? Studying. I didn't think about it then. A different life began for me. Beautiful, bright, full. It seemed it would always be this way. Time passed. The always attentive Max changed. He started staying late at work. Then came endless business trips, from which he inexplicably returned with a bronze tan. Absorbed in new acquaintances, work, shopping, I didn't notice it right away. And when I realized something was wrong, I got scared. Only then did it dawn on me. My happiness was fragile and illusory. It depended entirely on Max, his attitude towards me, his decisions. And Max. His love seemed so reliable, strong, eternal. But he was drifting away. I tried to fix it. Luxurious lingerie, culinary delights, gifts. I brought up the topic of a child, although we hadn't planned one initially. Max reacted to all my efforts with complete indifference. Only the conversation about a child annoyed him a little. "We're not ready yet," he snapped. "It's too early to think about kids. We haven't had enough fun ourselves yet." And one day Victoria went through her husband's phone while he was in the bathroom. Usually he carried it with him, but that time he left it on the table. She stumbled upon a correspondence with Christine, Max's mistress. There was no doubt. The messages were eloquent, interspersed with explicit photos and even videos of Christine. Victoria expected excuses, but he just shrugged, as if to say, "What's the big deal?" In his world, having a mistress was just a fact of life. Max's father behaved the same way, as did most of his friends. Men earn and do what they want. Women endure and serve. Everyone has their role. Victoria was even ready to put up with it for the sake of a beautiful life. But Christine. Victoria felt a threat in her. She tried to talk to her husband cautiously without offending, but making it clear that his behavior was unacceptable. The tactic didn't work. One day a scandal erupted. Max called things by their names, reminded Victoria where he had taken her from and what she gained from their marriage, explained that everything had a price. Victoria felt like a nobody. She wasn't afraid of losing Max. He had become repulsive to her, a puffed-up peacock. She was afraid of losing her new life, which she had gotten used to. And so she resigned herself. Victoria sighed, looking thoughtfully at Arthur. Sometimes I was disgusted with myself. But I lived with Max, pretending to be an exemplary wife and having otherworldly love when necessary, something like that. Victoria endured Max's endless infidelity and neglect, receiving unlimited money in return. And instead of saving for her own business or apartment, she spent everything on entertainment, clothes, clubs with friends, trips to the sea, expensive perfume. These joys helped her distract herself, feel happy. But more and more often, Victoria felt longing and a chilling emptiness in her chest. Alcohol helped her forget, but only for a short time. And then Max announced the divorce, casually, as if it were a trifle. Victoria felt as if she had been punched in the gut. She understood she would have to return to her parents' apartment. All the property was registered under Max's father. She would get nothing. Again, the shabby Khrushchev-era apartment, her constantly drunk father, her mother counting every penny. No profession, no savings. A banal story. My own fault. Victoria sighed sadly again. Sorry for opening up like this. It just poured out. I'm tired of keeping everything inside. And you were always good, understanding, too wise for your age. It's nice to talk to you. The story turned out to be anecdotally banal. Max met a young beauty at a club. A romance began. The girl, not being a fool, got pregnant and caught Max off guard. He, before the passion cooled, decided to get rid of the old wife. That's how Victoria returned home. She couldn't live with her parents. She sold her brand-name clothes, pawned her jewelry. It was enough for 6 months' rent. She went looking for work. Of course, she was fired from her father-in-law's company. She had no education without a diploma. She somehow managed to get a job as a waitress in a bar. I like it here, Victoria finally smiled. The music is good. The people are cheerful. It's even fun. I'm so sorry, Arthur said with sympathy. That must be hard. Max played with a pretty toy, found a new one, and got rid of the old one. Terrible. It's okay. It's good we didn't have time to churn out kids. He always treated me condescendingly from above. And I, a silly young girl, thought it was care, patronage, love. Nothing of the sort. His new wife is unlikely to be happy. So I'm even glad I got rid of him, really. Victoria looked into Arthur's eyes. Tell me about yourself. Do you have someone? No, Arthur lied for some reason. I don't have anyone. I'm free. Looking at Victoria, he couldn't tell her about Nina, and Nina seemed distant and alien at that moment. They sat for a long time that evening, recalling the past, mutual acquaintances. Arthur easily and naturally confessed his many years of love for Victoria. I wish I had known that. That's exactly what I was looking for. Sincere feelings. Love. But the guys who hung around me, they, as you understand, only wanted one thing. I thought it couldn't be any different. Then they walked through the night city. They didn't want to part. Arthur put his arm around Victoria's shoulders. She leaned against him trustingly. She invited him to her place. She rented an apartment near the bar. Arthur agreed. So they spent their first night together. In the morning, Arthur felt truly happy. She was there, Victoria, an unprecedented surge of energy, lightness in his soul. This mood wasn't even clouded by thoughts of Nina. He would talk to her, definitely talk to her, explain everything. Nina was smart, she would understand. Dreams just have to come true. Absolutely. Otherwise, life loses its meaning. They started dating, Victoria and Arthur. He did tell her about Nina eventually. Arthur hid nothing from his beloved. He wanted to be sincere. Victoria was upset, tensed up. Distrust flickered in her eyes. That's happened to me before, she said in a fallen tone. There was a man. He promised to divorce for me. He didn't. This is a different situation, and we're not even married. The conversation with Nina was long and difficult. Arthur sweated as if he had unloaded 3 coal cars. The always calm Nina was hysterical, sobbing, begging him to reconsider, cursing him and the hateful Victoria. Arthur's heart ached with pain, looking at his former fiancée. It seemed Nina really did love him. Later, Arthur would learn from mutual acquaintances that Nina couldn't bear life without her beloved and tried to commit suicide. Fortunately, she was quickly found and revived. She spent some time in the hospital, working with psychiatrists. Because of this impulsive act, the girl lost her prestigious job. Arthur felt guilty about what happened to her. But how could he help? No one is obliged to sacrifice their happiness and dreams for another, Victoria reassured him. She moved in with him immediately after Arthur broke up with Nina. Neither of them wanted to part. They wanted to be close. Through friends, Arthur offered Nina help. She proudly refused. She no longer wanted to hear about her former fiancé. She perceived his action as meanness and betrayal. Even though he hadn't lied, he told her everything right away. Anyway, everything turned out wonderfully for Nina. She recovered, found a job, got married, and had 2 beautiful boys, one after the other. Arthur was happy for her. He even tried to call, to talk, but realized it was pointless. Years had passed, and bright, joyful events had happened in her life. Well, okay. If not, then not. Arthur and Victoria also got married. The initial passion subsided. Everything settled down. Arthur was happy and thought things would only get better. Victoria quit her job. Arthur supported this decision. He didn't feel he had the right to advise, but since she wanted to, he just supported her. He didn't like his wife working nights in a bar, smiling at tipsy men. He was jealous, probably. He could perfectly well provide for their small family. The house immediately became cozier. When Arthur returned from work, the rooms were tidy and smelled of delicious food. Victoria was wonderful, beautiful, graceful, stunning, the best. Arthur forgave her small weaknesses, whims, demanding nature, complaints about nothing. It even seemed cute. And anyway, beauties are allowed a little more. That's an axiom. And then something unforeseen happened. The company Spectrum, where Arthur worked, went bankrupt. Competitors had seen to it. It was a long and dark story. Spectrum was bought out by Moscow businessmen, divided, ruined. People were laid off. Arthur suddenly found himself jobless. No, he was quickly invited to a factory. A specialist of his level was known in the city, but the salary offered was 5 times less than at Spectrum, and even that was a concession. The salary was above the city average. They had to tighten their belts. Victoria was used to spending large sums. She went to fitness and spa, loved shopping, was a regular at the cosmetologist's. She dressed beautifully, sat with friends in restaurants, flew to the sea several times a year. And suddenly all this stopped. Arthur himself was worried, but for Victoria, the decline in the quality of life was a tragedy, especially since it wasn't about temporary difficulties. There were no prospects for Arthur in this city. Victoria tried to encourage her husband to start a business. "What's wrong with you? That requires a different kind of character." "I'm not like that," he answered honestly. He didn't see himself leading a business, not the right mentality, not the right drive, but he was an excellent executor. "Yeah, that requires backbone like Max." Victoria shook her head in disappointment. It hurt Arthur to be compared to Max, and not favorably, but he never once reminded his beloved how and why her relationship with her ex-husband ended. Now Victoria didn't cook, didn't clean, fundamentally didn't do housework, even though she wasn't working. "I didn't sign up to be a free maid," she would declare in the evenings. Arthur would sigh and go to the kitchen himself to boil pasta with sausages or fry eggs. He forgave Victoria's unfair reproaches. The main thing was to save the relationship, not to say too much. And then Victoria announced she was expecting a child. The man was happy. This was what they needed. A baby would appear in the family. It would bring them closer. True, the future mother herself was clearly not thrilled. She even thought about termination. Arthur talked her out of it. The pregnancy was difficult. Victoria felt unwell. Her back and stomach hurt. Her mood constantly changed. She blamed Arthur for all her misfortunes. It was he who couldn't provide for his wife and child, and that's why Victoria suffered. The man felt guilty, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't earn more. His salary was decent by city standards, but Victoria needed more. Arthur thought that after the child was born, Victoria would change. Pregnant women often have fluctuating hormones, and then everything returns to normal. But no. Milana appeared, and Victoria immediately fell into a prolonged apathy. Her daughter didn't bring her joy or inspiration. Sometimes it seemed that the only feeling the mother had for the newborn was irritation. When Arthur came home, he often found a terrible scene. his daughter crying in her playpen, and Victoria in the next room chatting on social media. The man tried to talk to his wife about parenting, gently, trying not to offend. A child at this age needs attention, warmth, care. "Are you suggesting I spoil her?" Victoria flared up. "Pick her up at every whimper, coo over her, forgetting about myself?" "No, of course not. But—" Victoria interrupted him, showering him with accusations that made him feel worthless. She screamed that she needed rest. She had produced a human being, suffered for 9 months, childbirth, then 24 hours a day with the baby without helpers, without the right to escape. "You can't send me to the sea. You don't have the money. You can't hire a nanny so I can do what's interesting. You have no right to tell me what to do. Just be quiet." There was so much hatred, contempt in Victoria's voice and gaze that Arthur was lost. It hurt to realize that the person closest to him saw him as a pathetic failure. He knew how sweet Victoria could be. When he worked at Spectrum and had money, everything was fine. So he was to blame for not being able to provide for the family, and everything was falling apart. Returning from work, Arthur took on the household chores, cooked, cleaned, played with his daughter. He even enjoyed it. Milana, in his arms, had missed her dad. Order was restored in the house. Arthur hired a nanny, since his beloved found it so difficult. But Victoria was unhappy even with this. They didn't get along. The nanny had the audacity to point out shortcomings in handling the child, so they had to part ways. The next nanny was less talkative. Victoria went shopping, to spa salons. She couldn't live life to the fullest, but Arthur tried to make sure his wife had money for entertainment on her card. He understood. Women on maternity leave need to relax. But Victoria's behavior could hardly be called relaxation. She lived her own life. She only came home to sleep, sometimes in the early morning, drunk and cheerful. Arthur worried about her. He still loved her and hoped it was a postpartum state. Although Milana was almost a year old, you never know. He saw how other women behaved, walking with Milana, going to clinics. He saw the way they looked at their babies, how gently they handled them, how they cooed. Milana didn't see this. Her mother was cold and indifferent. Victoria touched her daughter out of necessity, didn't approach her unnecessarily. She couldn't come, play with Milana, sing, tell her poems. Arthur even tried to start a business. It seemed that if he had money, everything would get better. Victoria would be the same. But nothing worked out. He only lost his savings. He thought about a family psychologist. He felt he couldn't hide the truth forever. He found a specialist. But before talking to his wife, something happened that changed everything. One day Arthur stayed late at work, returned later than usual. Victoria wasn't home. The nanny was with Milana, a saintly woman who endured the irregular hours and didn't comment on Victoria's antics. This wasn't surprising. Victoria often returned late. It was Friday. She was probably at a club with friends. She hadn't felt the need to inform her husband for a long time. Arthur let the nanny go, made dinner. Milana was sleeping. Poor child, deprived of her mother's love. And her constantly busy father couldn't give her enough attention. The man worried about this. His child lacked the warmth of loved ones. Arthur went into the bedroom, looked around. His heart constricted with a premonition of trouble. Something was wrong. Finally, he understood. Victoria's things were significantly fewer. He rushed to the closet, the dressing table. A lot was missing. The jewelry box, given during good times, her favorite dresses, small items. Victoria hadn't taken everything, only the most cherished and valuable. This list clearly didn't include her husband. Later, in the kitchen cupboard, Arthur found a note that explained everything. Victoria had met a businessman from Germany, Georg, on social media. The correspondence quickly became serious. Georg admired Victoria's appearance, her sensuality, sincerity, tenderness. Victoria knew how to present herself in a favorable light. Arthur sighed heavily. He wondered if Georg would look at her the same way if he lost his fortune. Georg came to visit Victoria several times. They met, fell in love, made plans. In short, Victoria left with him. She filed for divorce, wrote a refusal of her daughter, had it officially notarized. The document lay under the note, written proof of what Arthur had long known. Milana was not needed by Victoria. Victoria didn't find the strength to say it to his face. She did it this way. Arthur felt the ground disappear from under his feet. He still loved Victoria, even this version of her, distant, cold, capricious. He hoped she would come to her senses, become her old self, and they would be happy. He was almost certain, but Victoria left. She abandoned him, left Milana. She fled to a new life, bright, prosperous, interesting. In the note, Victoria asked him not to seek meetings. Milana, do what you want. Raise her yourself or put her in an orphanage. You also have the right to refuse and start a new life. This child was a big mistake, and our marriage apparently too. It seemed possible back then when we met in the bar. It seemed something was possible. It didn't work out. We are different. We don't fit. But I wish you personal happiness. Be happy, just like I am. That was all. Arthur couldn't believe Victoria was like this. A monster, cold and calculating. Put Milana in an orphanage. He had no one closer than his daughter. Before it seemed there was Victoria, she would recover. She would become sweet, caring, faithful. Financial difficulties were normal. They weren't that poor. They couldn't throw money around, but they had everything necessary and more. Arthur reluctantly admitted, Victoria was with him because of money. She was in a dire situation, looking for someone to pull her out of poverty, to support her. And she found one. Victoria was happy, twisting the enamored Arthur around her finger. When he lost his job and had less money, she started looking for another option. The child was no obstacle. Victoria really didn't show up again. She lived in Germany. He saw photos on social media. He tried to contact her, ended up on the blacklist. Victoria wasn't interested in her daughter. Arthur couldn't understand this. It seemed that over time, her heart would ache for the baby. But no. Arthur resigned himself to fate, until it presented a new turn. A year later, Milana was diagnosed with a rare blood disease. Genetics debuted, the professor explained. It would have happened sooner or later. Milana was 4. Endless tests and treatments began. Arthur felt he had to succeed before school, find a therapy, stabilize her condition. He thought medicine was strong. They would help. Yes, she would have to be on pills all her life. Unpleasant, but many people are like that. But the disease was rare and insidious. It affected the blood. The little girl got tired, felt nauseous. The nanny, who looked after Milana around the clock, worried and cried. Looking at her, Arthur thought of Victoria. She didn't even know about the trouble. And if she knew, would she help? The man tried to reach his ex-wife again. She didn't want to know about him. Georg married her. They were raising a son, Milana's half-brother. From photos on social media, Victoria was a doting mother to this child. This gave him hope. Maybe now she would understand the importance of a mother to a little girl. She wouldn't remain indifferent to her daughter's illness. Maybe she would help, find a German professor, arrange treatment, and Milana would recover. But Victoria categorically refused to communicate with her ex-husband, and she didn't want to know about her daughter either. However, Arthur managed to tell a friend of Victoria's about what had happened. She asked me to tell you to forget about her existence, as if she doesn't exist, as if she died, the friend relayed. That's what she said. After this conversation, Arthur understood that he would have to rely only on himself. There was no hope for Victoria. She had completely erased her ex-husband and daughter, and Arthur continued the fight for his beloved Milana's health alone. He had no one closer or dearer. Milana grew up a daddy's girl, looking at her father with eyes full of adoration, as if he were a demigod. Arthur couldn't let her down. Milana grew up kind and smiling. Despite her illness, she tried to enjoy life. Arthur was surprised by the simple things that brought her delight. a butterfly on a leaf, the dance of snowflakes, a creeping cat. "Daddy, how beautiful, look." The little girl would point her finger at things that hadn't evoked feelings in Arthur before. And he understood. Yes, his daughter was right. It was amazing. Arthur tried to spend every free minute with his daughter. He liked listening to her thoughts, making plans. Milana dreamed of becoming an artist, traveling the world with exhibitions. Looking at her drawings, Arthur understood. Perhaps she had talent. He enrolled her in a preschool art class, but she couldn't attend for the same reason she couldn't go to kindergarten. The illness drained her strength, made her susceptible to infections. Arthur found a way out. He invited an art teacher home. A middle-aged woman immediately fell in love with Milana. Of course, this radiant little girl was charming with her tenderness. Only she wasn't getting better, on the contrary. Over the years, the disease progressed. The disease is rare, little studied, genetics. Genetics are complex. She drew an unhappy ticket, he heard from doctors. All the doctors said the same thing. Only a few study it. The waiting lists are miles long. Treatment is expensive. Each case is individual. Some go into remission. Nothing helps others. Arthur knew all the professors dealing with his daughter's illness. There were few of them. In Russia, two, Dr. Peterson and Dr. Miller, both in Moscow. He couldn't get to either. Huge queues, expensive consultations, schedules booked for a year. Arthur was told to call back in a couple of months. He called every week, heard the same thing. No appointments. Call in a month or two. Hope of getting in was almost gone. He tried to contact foreign professors. It was even more difficult there. Arthur felt devastated and helpless. He looked at his daughter. Milana was fading, becoming weaker, paler. Shadows lay beneath her turquoise eyes. It was unbearable to watch. Arthur secured a transfer to the Moscow Research Institute of Hematology for a supportive course. This didn't solve the problem, but it bought time. Arthur fought tooth and nail for this time. He knew, even the luminaries who had dedicated their lives to fighting such diseases might not be able to help. Arthur was aware of this, but he had to try. There were people who had recovered. There were chances, not small ones. If only he could break through to the professors, reach them. He took a leave of absence from work. He would go to Moscow with his daughter himself. He wouldn't leave it to the nanny. She was great. It was time to spend time with his child. If Milana feels better, we'll go to the zoo, to Red Square. Great holidays. Milana was admitted to the day hospital. Every day Arthur took his daughter. She had procedures. Then he picked her up at the hotel. They rented a room with a huge TV and a view of the Moscow River. Arthur hoped she would feel better after rehabilitation. It had happened before. She would get sick, go to the hospital, have injections, IVs, transfusions, procedures, and Milana would come alive, gain weight. Her cheeks would turn pink. Her liveliness would return. He was counting on this. And this time it didn't work out. Milana remained weak. She stopped drawing. It was hard to hold pencils. She lay in bed all day. What zoo? What Red Square? Arthur asked the doctors. They shrugged. The disease was taking its toll. It happens. Supportive therapy wasn't radical treatment. It was outside the competence of general doctors. Experiments, an individual approach were needed. Everything came down to needing to get to Dr. Miller or Dr. Peterson. Arthur tried to get his daughter into a 24-hour hospital. Her condition was worsening. The father was afraid that something terrible would happen and he would be alone. No beds, the doctors replied. No urgent indications. The condition is stable, expected. Emergency help is not needed. Arthur understood. Milana was fading. If he didn't arrange something with a professor now, while they were in Moscow, if he took her home, nothing would help. The thought made him feel hot. He decided he wouldn't leave. He would lie in wait for the doctors, ambush them after work, break into the operating room, and force them to admit Milana. Let him go to prison afterward, but he would succeed. Now Arthur was sitting on a bench in the park for this very reason. Opposite was Dr. Peterson's hospital. Dr. Miller had gone to a conference. Only Dr. Peterson remained. The workload increased. Arthur knew what the doctor looked like. Middle-aged, a little older than him, dark hair, brown eyes, sharp cheekbones, a strong chin. Arthur hadn't been waiting for Dr. Peterson for the first day. He would wait until Milana fell asleep and go to his post. He couldn't be away for long. Milana. He didn't want to leave her alone. While she slept, he could keep watch. He hadn't managed to catch Dr. Peterson. The plan was unsuccessful. Break into the hospital, find the doctor, force him to admit Milana. First beg, then threaten. A desperate father was ready for anything. Anxious thoughts swirled in his head. In his soul, anger, hatred, envy of parents of healthy children. Arthur didn't like these feelings. He considered himself a good person. That's how Eleanor had raised him. But he was ready for something terrible, for crimes, anything, just to save Milana. If necessary, he would take Dr. Peterson's relatives hostage. The consequences would be terrible, but Milana would stay alive, if he was lucky. "Why are you so sad?" A clear, ringing voice distracted him from his thoughts. Arthur turned around. A thin boy of about 7 was sitting next to him, a little older than Milana. Blue eyes, a freckled, upturned nose, a curious gaze. He needed a haircut badly. His hair was sticking up. His clothes. Caring but poor parents. Old, worn, unfashionable, scuffed sneakers. But the sweater was neatly darned. "Why are you so sad?" the boy asked again. "Me? No, I'm not sad. Just thinking." "No, I see you are. Don't worry, everything will be fine. It's often like this. First bad, and then it gets better. Sooner or later." "You're right," Arthur smiled. It was impossible not to smile looking into those clear eyes. The boy was sincere, bright, real. He radiated a special energy, an amazing child. "And why are you walking alone? Where are your parents?" Arthur looked around. The boy was too small for solo walks. He was acting carelessly, sat down next to a stranger, started talking. You never know who you might meet. "Alone. Grandma's sick. And I came here to see a friend. He waits every day. I help him. He helps me." "Sounds like you're real friends," Arthur smiled. "Keep in touch. That kind of friendship is rare." "I know," the boy smiled. He was missing 2 front teeth. His smile was funny, touching. A wonderful boy. He talked easily. It was worrying that he was walking alone. "Grandma's sick and your parents are working? That's why you're alone? Does Grandma know where her grandson is?" "She knows. Yes. Don't be scared. I'm big. I understand everything. I know how to cross the road. I avoid bad people." "Arthur, I'm a stranger to you, someone you don't know, and you talk like that." "You're a good person," the boy stated with childish spontaneity. "You can tell right away." Tears welled up in Arthur's eyes, trusting, sweet, calling him good, not knowing about his dark thoughts. Arthur was ready for a crime, and the boy thought he was good. Anyone could deceive him, the defenseless child. "Still, don't talk to strangers. People, you know, can be all sorts." "Parents told me, didn't tell me," the boy shook his head. "I don't know them. I don't remember. Grandma raised me. Parents died when I was little. They were in an accident. I was in the car. I survived. Wasn't hurt. Grandma said angels saved me because I have to grow up and make the world better." "That's quite a story you have," Arthur said. He looked at the boy with different eyes. Life wasn't easy for him, but he was open, kind, sociable. He was going to save the world. "My name is Matthew, by the way," he introduced himself. "And yours is Arthur. Uncle Arthur." A woman with a cart of pastries walked by. Buns, sweet buns. It didn't escape Arthur's notice how Matthew followed the cart with his eyes. It dawned on him. The child was from a poor family, hungry. "Matthew, did you have breakfast?" "A friend treated me to a sandwich. That was a long time ago." He wanted to eat, but was shy. Arthur walked up to the woman, bought 2 buns with raisins. He handed one to Matthew. The boy sank his teeth into it like a little wolf. It was pleasant to watch him eat with such appetite, especially after his unsuccessful attempts to feed Milana. She ate nothing. "Is the second one for you?" Matthew asked. "Why aren't you eating? It's tasty." "No, for my daughter," Arthur replied. He thought Milana might want to try it. He would be happy if she managed a quarter. "You have a daughter? What's her name? How old is she?" "Milana. She just turned 6. Why didn't you bring her to the park? The weather is nice. You could have walked." "You see, Matthew, Milana is sick. She has a fever." A naive little boy. He didn't know about diseases worse than a fever. "No, it's more serious. Not a fever. It's related to blood. Hematological." Arthur's eyes widened. Where did he get words like that? It didn't fit with the appearance of a freckled, toothless first grader. "Wow, where did you get that knowledge?" "My friend knows a lot. He tells me things," Matthew explained. "You know, your daughter needs fresh air and good emotions." "I agree," Arthur sighed. Matthew surprised him more and more. "But Milana is weak. It's hard for her to walk." "Then maybe I could come to your place?" "Do you live far?" "I want to become a doctor. I know how to treat a little. It helps Grandma when I put my hand on her forehead. She says it feels better." "And Grandma wouldn't mind you going to strangers?" "She wouldn't," the little boy assured him. "She knows I'm good at reading people. I avoid bad ones." On the one hand, Matthew was right. Milana needed emotions. Arthur didn't know how to cheer her up. She was indifferent to toys, watched cartoons without interest, didn't eat sweets. She lacked interaction with children. Once she dreamed of going to kindergarten, playing on the playground. She talked about it a lot. But it didn't work out. She was too weak. And here was Matthew with an offer. It felt strange to go to a hotel with a strange child. He could get into trouble, although he wasn't planning anything bad. He decided to take the risk. Matthew was radiant, open, sensitive. If he could cheer Milana up even a little, the risk would be worth it. When they entered the room, Milana wasn't sleeping. She was lying there looking at the ceiling. Seeing the unfamiliar boy, she perked up, her eyes lit up. "Who is that?" she asked, sitting up slightly. "I'm Matthew," the guest announced. "Your dad and I became friends. I came to visit. And I'm Milana." "I know. Uncle Arthur told me. I know you're sick." "Yes," she nodded sadly. "Don't worry. The doctors are good. They're treating you. I'll become a doctor when I grow up. And I'll be an artist. Do you draw?" Milana replied proudly. Arthur was pleased to hear that tone. Before, she was indifferent to everything. But here she joined the conversation. "Dad, get the folder." Matthew climbed onto the blanket. Milana sat up and started showing him her masterpieces. Matthew looked through them with interest. Milana explained the stories. They were happy, interested in each other. Arthur smiled, looking at his animated daughter, and went into the other room. "Maybe watching Matthew, Milana will eat?" Children's laughter came from the room. It was amazing. Milana rarely smiled. Amazing and wonderful. Then Arthur walked Matthew home. An old 5-story building behind the park. Milana had fallen asleep by the time the guest left. The illness drained her strength. "Milana is very sick," Matthew said sadly on the way. "I'll ask my friend how to cure her. He'll help. He, is so smart." Arthur smiled. A naive little boy who thought someone who read books was a genius. Funny, but sad. It was a pity Matthew was mistaken. He wished the child's words were true. "Can I come tomorrow?" "Come," Arthur smiled. "At the same time. Not earlier. Milana will be at the hospital." "Okay, I'll come. You'll help me a lot if you stay with her while I run some errands." Arthur understood. While Matthew was with Milana, he could go to Dr. Peterson's house. Catch him. Talk to him. Convince him. "I'll definitely stay with Milana. She's a good girl, not like bossy Mary. Milana draws beautifully." The next day, Matthew kept his promise. He knocked exactly at 1. Milana was waiting. She had prepared a game. Arthur met Matthew and drove to Dr. Peterson's house in a prestigious neighborhood. He took up position. He couldn't wait long. He couldn't keep Matthew until night. His grandmother would worry. Milana was sleeping again when Arthur returned. He noted she was paler. "She's worse." Matthew looked up, his eyes full of despair. "Can I bring my friend tomorrow? He'll help. He's the smartest and kindest." "Of course. Come," the distraught Arthur allowed. "The more the merrier. Milana will be happy." "You will be too," Matthew promised. "You'll be happy to see him too." That night, Milana got worse. Fever, chills. Arthur stopped the attack by calling an ambulance. The doctor said supportive measures. A little more, and they wouldn't be able to cope. Milana was sleeping, and he held her hand, stroked her fingers, thinking where to find Dr. Peterson. Go to the hospital, threaten him. There were people, security. They would kick him out, call the police, ambush him somewhere else. The next day was as usual. He woke his daughter, tried to feed her. She managed a couple of spoons. He called a taxi, carried her out. They went to the clinic. Milana was put on a gurney to the elevator, waiting for procedures. Arthur sat in the lobby, scrolling through news, looking out the window, chatting with mothers. Mostly mothers, attentive, caring. Arthur thought he didn't measure up to their level. Women were better with children. It was a pity his girl was deprived of maternal warmth. Later, Milana, despite her fatigue, asked, "Would Matthew be here soon?" The boy was late. Arthur thought he wouldn't come. Had his grandmother not let him? Had he gotten caught up playing? He was sociable, had many friends. But there was a knock at the door. Alone or with a friend? At the threshold, Matthew smiled widely, and behind him, a grown man shifted his weight. Not just a man. Dark eyes, a strong chin, chiseled cheekbones. Dr. Peterson. Arthur barely kept his feet. What was happening? How was this possible? "Hi, Uncle Arthur," Matthew said. "Meet my friend, Uncle Andrew. Remember you said he could come? He'll help Milana." A year and a half had passed since that day. Arthur was back in Moscow, in that park, on that bench. Spring, mid-April. Lush greenery, blue sky, warm sun. Arthur sat on the bench, looking with tenderness at Matthew and Milana. The children had drawn hopscotch and were jumping. Both had grown, matured. Matthew was almost a teenager. The same open gaze, the charming, no longer gap-toothed smile. Taller, stronger, good. He hadn't lost his spontaneity. He would probably remain like this, kind, attentive, sensitive. Milana was 7. Arthur hadn't hoped a year and a half ago that the girl would go to a regular school. At best, homeschooling, at worst. It was hard to think about. "You beat me again!" There was admiration in Matthew's voice. Milana smiled proudly. Arthur chuckled. He saw everything. Matthew was letting her win so she would feel strong, agile. He knew she needed emotions, belief in herself. He was trying. He acted 10 years older than he was, a little sage. On that memorable day, Arthur couldn't believe for a long time that Matthew's friend turned out to be Dr. Peterson. The boy had mentioned that his friend understood medicine, but he hadn't said he was one of the 2 famous professors. Dr. Peterson turned out to be wonderful. Arthur told him about their trouble. While the men talked, the children played in the bedroom. Dr. Peterson was horrified at how difficult it was to get to him. He hadn't known about the situation. He decided to create a website so patients could contact him directly. After a thorough, detailed examination, the professor developed a treatment plan. It was expensive, but Dr. Peterson secured subsidies. Milana began to recover. She didn't completely get rid of the disease. She would have to take medication. But she was no different from healthy children. She became quick, noisy, energetic, even started being mischievous, which pleased Arthur. It meant she had enough energy for childish antics. And that was happiness. Not everyone would understand. Milana started school, in 2 schools, and art school. Every year she went to Moscow for rehabilitation. Both daughter and father were happy about this circumstance. Matthew lived in Moscow, the amazing boy who played a key role. He also waited for Uncle Arthur and his best friend to arrive. How did Matthew know Dr. Peterson? How did the professor and the boy from a poor family become friends? Matthew met Andrew at the hospital where his grandmother was taken with a heart attack. The little boy was worried, crying. Dr. Peterson helped him calm down. He talked to him, gave him water. They talked for a long time. His grandmother laughed, cried. When the danger passed, Dr. Peterson delivered the good news. By that time, the boy and the man had become friends. Matthew had managed to say he would become a doctor. Topics for conversation appeared. Dr. Peterson was touched by the fate of the radiant little boy. He didn't want him to end up in an orphanage and took him in. Dr. Peterson's wife gladly welcomed the guest. They had a son of the same age, and the boys got along well. So since then, Matthew came to visit his friend, Uncle Andrew, at the hospital. Despite being busy, he didn't refuse to talk, participated in his life, understanding that it was hard for the elderly woman to cope alone. When Matthew, wiping away tears, told Dr. Peterson about Milana, he couldn't remain indifferent, especially since it was about a disease the professor specialized in. Arthur and Dr. Peterson were now friends. Andrew personally made sure that his signature was on Milana's condition reports. Most often, of course, they talked about Matthew. His fate was important to both of them. "He's a wonderful kid," Arthur said. "I wish I had a son like that." "He's smart and, most importantly, sensitive," Dr. Peterson agreed. "A combination for a future doctor. He'll become a doctor who saves more than one life."